Hello, and thank you for joining everyone from wherever you are today. My name is Stephen Jones, and I'm a General Manager of our EC2 Enterprise SAP team. And today I'm excited to share some of the lessons learned from some of our customers who are choosing to migrate their SAP workloads to AWS. Now, customers worldwide are increasingly choosing AWS to host their SAP workloads for the increased performance, security, reliability, and scalability. And while it's still generally early for cloud adoption, we're observing a number of interesting trends as it relates to SAP customers. First, it's estimated that more than 80% of SAP customers are already using cloud for at least one application. And increasingly, these same customers are compelled to derive the same cost, agility, and innovation benefits from their mission-critical SAP workloads as well. Next, the end of support deadline for ECC has been a bit of a moving target since the release of S4HANA in 2016. And customers are factoring this into their decision-making. And while SAP has said it will commit to supporting ECC until 2027 under a standard support contract, they've also indicated that some customers may be able to extend this up to 2030. And while we're seeing a bunch of customers move to S4HANA on AWS, it's estimated that over 2/3 of SAP customers haven't even started the move yet at all. And what's more, it's estimated again that 80% of large businesses haven't even reached the POC phase yet. So simply put, many customers are struggling to make a business case, while others are simply not in a place to tolerate the operational interruption, typically of an ECC to a large S4 upgrade today. And yet we don't see the slowing migrations to AWS at all. In fact, adoption of AWS by SAP customers all over the world continues to accelerate at a rapid clip. And we're seeing this across nearly every industry and region, with industry leaders choosing AWS as their platform of innovation to get more out of their current SAP investments. Let's take a look at a few of these. So in healthcare and life sciences, we have the likes of Moderna, Bristol-Myers Squibb, and Bayer. In retail and consumer packaged goods, we have customers like Bose and Peloton, Zalando, and Uniqlo, for a good example. In energy, the energy sector, we've got British Petroleum, Origin Energy, and Engie, a big company in France. In the technology sector, we've got the companies like HP Inc., Siemens, and even SAP themselves. And it's this large and global customer base that continues to provide insights and feedback, which we're able to use to develop new products and services as well. And this creates a virtuous innovation cycle or flywheel. As more and more customers move to AWS, we get feedback and we expand our product and service portfolio for SAP. Now, our observations come from more than a decade of experience supporting SAP customers. And when SAP started using AWS to build some of their own products and services in 2008, we quickly became the first cloud provider to help them host an SAP workload. And then in 2011, we quickly turned our focus with them to certify native EC2 infrastructure for ECC on any database, which led to the certification of EC2, and again, the first cloud infrastructure for SAP certification. Now, we quickly followed this by certifying EC2 instances for HANA a few years later, which was, again, another industry first. And then to help safeguard customers in these critical deployments of SAP systems faster, we released some AWS Quick Starts for SAP HANA, and this really was the first automated deployment experience for an SAP workload in the cloud. Now, we've also been working closely with SAP over the years to power many of their own products. And this includes the SAP Business Technology Platform, which AWS supports in 10 regions, HANA Cloud, and some additional various go-to-market offerings like Rise with SAP. And also over the course of this 10-year journey, customers have absolutely been pushing us to go bigger. And we've responded by continually releasing additional native EC2 compute options, as well as storage options. And today, customers have the ability to deploy the broadest set of Amazon EC2 instances for SAP and SAP HANA workloads. Now for HANA, these actually range from a 1/4 terabyte of RAM all the way to a whopping 24 terabytes of RAM, all in a single instance today. And these are the only offerings that run as true cloud-native instances that are deeply integrated with other software-defined infrastructure capabilities that are enabled on the AWS platform. And then last year, we extended on the automation of these quick start deployments for SAP that I already previously mentioned, and we released a console-based deployment wizard for SAP, and I'll talk a little bit about more of that in a bit. Now, one of the things we consistently observe is that there is no single customer journey that is the same. And customers clearly pick migration strategies that meet their own unique business requirements. But we are seeing some common patterns. First, a lot of customers, the first step is actually migrating their existing SAP systems out of their own data centers and into AWS. And this is really to reduce technical debt, to move to a more flexible, agile, and more scalable and secure infrastructure. Now, for some customers, HANA and S/4HANA don't actually initially play a role. And these customers, again, are typically lifting and shifting ECC on Oracle or SQL Server or another database platform like DB2 to AWS without making a lot of changes. Now, some of our other customers are actually moving ECC on NADB and actually moving to a business suite on HANA technology platform, which represents a meaningful step towards a longer-term S/4HANA transformation. And yet other customers who have a business case for S/4HANA and plan for a transition choose to build an upgrade into their migration plan also to AWS. Now, the interesting thing is that in all cases, once a customer is actually on AWS, we see many quickly shifting their focus towards modernizing their business processes by building microservices around SAP with other native AWS cloud services. Now, I want to spend a few moments talking about each of these migration approaches and discussing a specific customer example and the reasons behind their migration approach. Now, as I mentioned before, for most customers, the best path for them is to just get their SAP landscapes to AWS as quickly as possible. Almost universally, IT execs are being asked to reduce costs. Move to AWS is actually one of the simplest ways to do so. In fact, a 2020 IDC study found that 87% of the SAP on AWS customers are seeing significant and modest cost savings. We also see that a lot of customers who are faced with decisions to either renew contracts with existing data center or managed service providers, this actually acts as a trigger for them to actually make a move to AWS. They see this really as a perfect time to move to this more cost-effective and flexible platform that they can find here. Now, this also positions them for a platform for the future, not just for an S/4HANA transformation down the line, but again for this native extension to their business processes using cloud-native services. Now, another thing we find common among customers is that many have extensive custom code that's already in their existing implementations, and they want to keep that functionality intact. And a lift and shift migration is great for customers with many or multiples of these attributes. And customers typically see faster time to value with these approaches than where they actually have to make application or big database changes underneath. And this is, in the end, actually leads to less disruption to core business processes. Now, the best part is you still benefit from the technical debt reduction that AWS brings, and your technical folks, your basis and your ABAP developers can continue to use the tools, the processes, and the code that they have today. Now, Del Monte is a really good example of this approach. Their IT department was tasked with reducing costs and increasing agility in a broader effort to improve operational efficiencies. And their SAP ECC estate was at the heart of their environment and had grown unstable and very expensive to maintain. And in total, they estimated they needed to migrate more than 200 servers, which represented 50 distinct SAP environments. The project also needed to be completed prior to Del Monte's fiscal year end and the critical canning season, which at the time they were looking at this was less than 4 months away. Now, wanting to minimize the impact to their core business processes, they opted to consolidate physical and virtual infrastructure, all of it on AWS. And so they moved their existing SAP footprint and the 25 terabytes of associated data to a new environment on AWS, and they stayed hyper-focused on minimizing business process changes. And this lift and shift approach enabled them to deliver against such an aggressive timeline without impacting businesses and staff. So in total, more than 200 servers were actually moved to AWS, and Del Monte estimated they saved about 35% on their overall IT infrastructure costs. They were also able to implement new disaster recovery and high availability capabilities, and told us they're actually now able to provision new systems in less than an hour, something that they said it was taking more than 3 weeks on premises. And the migration was so seamless, the business users didn't even notice the cutover. And now Del Monte is using additional AWS services like analytics to gain greater insight and visibility into their IT operations and spend. So let's talk a little bit about the second approach, that is staying on ECC, but modernizing your database from something like Oracle or SQL Server and moving to Suite on HANA as part of your migration. Now, we see customers do this for a number of different reasons. First, many want to position for, again, that future transformation to S/4HANA down the line, but due to the lack of financial resources, they're unable to tolerate the business process changes required today to actually take on that monumental effort. Second, there's often a broader effort to consolidate database or software platforms, and in many cases, licensing terms can be much more favorable with SAP HANA. And in other cases, there's just simply a desire to gain the performance benefits of SAP's in-memory database engine. And so this approach really represents an incremental step in the journey to S/4HANA down the line. Customers are able to get the in-memory performance capabilities of HANA eliminate technical debt from legacy database systems, and simplify a future S4 implementation by getting the database platform handled today. So as an example of this, I want to talk a little bit about Newmont. Now, in April of 2019, Newmont acquired Goldcorp, which was the largest acquisition in the history of the gold industry. Now, Newmont already had a bunch of SAP ECC systems spread across 2 different data center environments in an on-premises deployment model. And they figured that adding Goldcorp's ECC landscapes to this would only exacerbate system redundancy. Furthermore, it would actually bring inconsistent operational experiences for their technical teams as they tried to bring the teams and processes together. So for them, this was a clear opportunity to simplify and modernize their SAP estate while also reducing costs. Now, Newmont engaged a number of our AWS partners, as well as our professional services team, and assessed 3 approaches here. First was the lift and shift of all the SAP systems as is to AWS, like I previously mentioned. They looked at a consolidation of their SAP ECC systems onto AWS, then followed by a brownfield S4 upgrade post-migration. And then finally, they took a look at consolidating all of their SAP systems on premises, and then looking at maybe doing an S4 greenfield implementation down the road on AWS. And as they thought through their choices, they actually led themselves to a 4th approach, which was to consolidate all of the ECC systems and move to a Suite on HANA platform as part of the migration, and then transition once they're on AWS to S4HANA post-migration. Now, interestingly enough, as they were assessing their options, their on-premises systems were actually stuck by a security breach, and some of the operational complications associated with the pandemic underscored the need to get to a highly secure and reliable global infrastructure platform quickly. And because they had chosen to decouple the S4 upgrade from the migration itself, they were able to get their system to AWS much, much faster to take advantage of the security, cost, and performance benefits. So let's talk a little bit about the approach. So Goldcorp was already running Suite on HANA, so the Newmont systems were actually upgraded from ECC on Oracle to Suite on HANA on AWS. And so then all the SAP workloads spread across 3 disparate data centers were actually brought into AWS, where they're now able to centrally manage them. And after stabilizing on AWS, they're now using SAP's S4HANA selective data transition process to bring key data across all of these Suite on HANA landscapes to a net new greenfield S4 implementation, which is actually in progress now. And so the result, by running on AWS, they have a much stronger security posture than their previous environment, and they estimate they're saving upwards $500,000 per year. And by consolidating, again, all these disparate ECC systems on AWS, they've also been able to streamline operations and management for their SAP environments. For example, they're now using the AWS Backint Agent for SAP HANA, and told us they've significantly reduced the complexity of managing their database backups. They've also told us that their successful migration to Suite on HANA has greatly simplified the now in progress S4HANA because all of the systems are consolidated on a single platform. And so finally, let's talk about making a move to S4HANA as part of your cloud migration. Now, if you have a clear business case for S4HANA today, you're driving a broader digital transformation, or have disparate ECC environments that you're ready to consolidate, then this approach might make sense for you. So with this approach, you're actually able to tackle the ECC end of support challenge now and gain capabilities included in S4HANA, like industry-specific workflows and a more simplified data model. Now, a good example of this is Bristol-Myers Squibb. Now, their executive team has really been driving a cloud-first initiative for some time. And their on-premise ECC installation, they told us, had accrued some pretty significant technical debt, and they were having challenges meeting stringent GxP compliance. It was becoming increasingly difficult. So they were looking for opportunities to improve system resiliency, also to aid in high availability and disaster recovery strategies if they were to actually make a move. And so for them, they decided the time was right for them to actually make a move to S4HANA, given the available resources and the organizational momentum internally, both of which they knew were not necessarily guaranteed down the line. And so together they worked with our AWS professional services team to build a robust high availability and disaster recovery test into their migration process, which ensured they landed on a more resilient architecture from day one. And another key component of their strategy was tied to their need to maintain their GxP compliance, as I mentioned earlier. So with AWS, they're actually able to leverage AWS CloudFormation and deployment automation to standardize and automate the compliance best practices. And so here you can actually see an overview of the high availability architecture I was referring to. So for the database tier along the bottom here, you can see that they leverage 12 terabyte high memory instances configured in a multi-data center setup, or what we call multi-AZ. And for the application tier, they actually leverage multiple web dispatchers and SAP Dialog instances, again, deployed in separate data centers. And then they use the standard highly available AWS networking load balancer construct for routing connection requests into the SAP environment. To automate all this, they actually configured automated failover for the database tier, as well as the application tier, ensuring they were protecting single points of failure for the SAP application like OnQ locks and the OnQ replication server. Now, keep in mind that this is a high availability setup that spans multiple data centers, and that's an important distinction. A setup that spans multiple data centers is typically not possible in an on-premises deployment, or even with some of the other hyperscale providers. But on AWS, you can actually blur the lines between high availability and disaster recovery by being able to deploy a high availability solution across multiple data centers for your production environment. And so the end result, BMS has actually dramatically reduced the cost and effort required to provision infrastructure. They've told us that they have the time it takes to qualify SAP systems per their GxP compliance requirements. And they've told us their technical teams can now spend a lot more time focused on the things that really matter versus the undifferentiated operational activities that they were doing previously. Now, as I showed in the last slide, they also dramatically improved their high availability implementation, and they're ready to handle any unexpected failure which may come. So I'd like to switch gears briefly here. And so far, I've really mostly focused on the migration patterns themselves, and for good reason. It's a major event in any SAP customer's journey, and simply running on AWS drives huge cost and agility benefits for most customers. But really, migration is the only beginning of optimization. And we understand that the operational burdens that most IT teams bear is actually pretty great. In fact, Gartner estimates that 90% of staff time on premises is actually spent simply keeping systems up and running. And many IT teams are also constrained by rigid infrastructure procurement and deployment practices on premises, which only tends to slow them down even further. So your SAP technical teams or basis teams, they're really no exception, which is why we AWS have been committed to providing operational tooling and management capabilities to simplify the experience of deploying and managing SAP workloads on AWS for quite some time now. And so the result is that AWS customers can come to AWS for their SAP workloads, spend less time keeping the lights on, and more time driving innovation for their businesses. So let's take a look at some of these offerings. Now, AWS, as I mentioned, has been committed to helping customers achieve operational efficiencies, which has resulted in a very broad set of AWS management tools. And a good percentage of these are immediately applicable to the SAP deployment environments as well. For example, Amazon AppStream makes it easy to virtualize the front end, SAP GUI, and provide secure end-user access to your SAP applications. AWS Systems Manager provides a unified user interface so you can view operational data for multiple AWS services, and also allows you to automate key operational tasks across a bunch of AWS resources. And then Amazon CloudWatch provides you with data and actionable insights to monitor your SAP applications, respond to system-wide performance changes, optimize resource utilization, and generally just get a unified view of operational health. But after customers started using the AWS platform for their SAP workloads early on, it didn't take long for them to start asking us for management and operational tooling specific and purpose-built for the SAP workload. And so what we did is we quickly responded to this request by delivering what we called AWS Quick Starts. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, this was the first guided deployment tooling for SAP in the cloud. And then in 2020, we actually extended on this legacy by adding support for SAP deployments to Launch Wizard. And furthermore, we actually released a new backup agent for SAP HANA, which makes it super simple to back up HANA databases directly to S3. Now, finally, we have a large global SAP professional services and solution architect team, and they have also built dedicated offerings that can help SAP customers optimize their AWS architecture and operations. Things like auto-scaling solutions for SAP, or even serverless system refresh using Lambda. It's pretty interesting what these guys are building. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about Launch Wizard. As I mentioned earlier, we've been investing to bring capabilities to help to simplify the deployment and operations of SAP specifically. And Quick Starts was just the first foray into helping customers automate very complex deployments. And customers really love this. And so we built additional Quick Starts to further simplify deployments for infrastructure like S4HANA and NetWeaver as well. And as we expanded over the years our number of instances and storage options and other features for SAP workloads, customers told us they wanted an even simpler experience and help in choosing infrastructure that balanced cost and performance when it came to production and non-production workloads. And so to help, we actually built a net new service called Launch Wizard for SAP, which provides a wizard-based experience in the AWS console. And so this tooling helps customers choose the right instance and the storage types for each individual SAP deployment. And what's cool is after every deployment, you can actually save off your deployment configuration and then reuse it again to launch additional systems later if needed. And Launch Wizard doesn't just stop with EC2 and EBS and S3. It actually helps customers configure 15 plus additional AWS services behind the scenes to ensure production-ready systems for SAP workloads. And we've been iterating the service at a really rapid clip and have recently made the automation of this workload extensible, allowing customers to inject their own scripts either pre or post-deployment. And since reInvent, we actually have added a couple of new capabilities to Launch Wizard, including the automated setup of high availability configurations for both the database and the application tier. And then finally, we're allowing customers now to bring their own IP addresses to these own deployment configurations. I alluded to this a little bit, but in April 2020 last year, we actually released a backup agent for SAP HANA to help customers easily back up their SAP databases to S3 directly. Now, prior to this, customers are actually taking this two-step process, backing up their HANA databases to EBS, and then using the AWS CLI to push this to S3. And so with this new agent, customers are actually able to back up and restore directly to S3, drastically reducing backup and restore times to meet their most stringent RTOs. Now, you can actually push up to 2 gigabits per second per node throughput, which actually scales linearly. And we tested this. So we took a 23 terabyte database, spread across 8 6 terabyte memory hosts, and we were actually able to back up the complete 23 terabytes in 23 minutes. So that's, yes, about a terabyte a minute. And so the best part here is that Backint is free, it's scalable, and you only pay for the S3 resources that you consume. Now you can easily install the Backint agent through, again, Systems Manager, or using the AWS Launch Wizard, which I previously spoke about, as part of the overall provisioning process. So I'd like to close by revisiting this notion of choice. Now, each customer's journey to the cloud is unique, and we recognize this. And we remain committed to being the most customer-obsessed technology company on the planet, and that means anchoring on each customer's needs versus one prescriptive approach. But we do see that the three approaches or patterns that I've discussed today have proven themselves time and time again to be a great starting point for thinking about your own migrations. So whether you're looking to get what you have into the cloud as quickly as possible to reduce costs, lift and shift, or take a more incremental approach with a Suite on HANA upgrade, or do a full move to S/4HANA, we'd love to support you. All of these can bring sizable benefits to your businesses. Now we have tons of resources to help you get started. I definitely recommend giving Launch Wizard a try. You'd be surprised at how much time this can save, and it's loaded with best practices both from SAP and AWS. Now, if you're looking to lift and shift your workloads, we have Cloud Endure migration tools and services that can help automate a bunch of this. We also have a migration accelerating program that provides incentives for customers, partner and PLC funding, and generally just proven migration methodologies, which can protect you as you migrate to AWS. And if you're looking for expert help as you plan and execute your migration, our AWS professional services, specialty practice, and our partners that carry the SAP competency can certainly help you be successful. And finally, you joined this summit to learn, and you can keep learning beyond this event as well. You can accelerate your professional development and transform your businesses with resources from AWS Training and Certification. And this is for you as well as your teams. Now, we offer a variety of digital training, classroom training, white papers, and guidelines that help you learn to be successful in migrating your existing applications to AWS. And we also want to help you build your professional development with cloud roles for you and your team. Now, for more information, please visit aws.training and see what resources are available to help you achieve your goals. I want to thank you for joining us today, and we're looking forward to helping you on your SAP migration journey. And please remember to fill out the session survey, and we look forward to talking to you soon.